From what we've seen so far from DC Dual Force's card art, they've decided to use existing pieces of art from DC's vast history. Opinions on this are always going to be divided, but personally I think using existing art from comic book covers and panels is pretty damn awesome. And I think it's awesome from all perspectives. For people who haven't read the comic books and don't know that the art exists already, well then it's not going to affect them. It's going to feel like playing any other card game. For the other people who haven't read the comic books, but they do know that the artwork comes from the comic books, it's a small snapshot into the history of the source material. And for the players and fans who have read the comic books, when they recognize a piece of art from the comics that they've already read, well, that's going to be a pretty exciting moment for them. Heck, even I've experienced that already. For example, when I first saw the Flash's card art, I could have sworn that I've seen it somewhere before. It turns out that's because I had seen it before. And that was a cool moment of realization. Well, this video is all about the origins of each of the different card arts that we have so far in the game. Sadly, we only have 11 revealed cards so far for DC Dual Force, but that's plenty to make a video out of. I figured I'd get out of the way, start documenting some of this stuff now, just in case there's no in-game archive for the origins of these artworks. Hopefully you'll be able to right-click on cards and see where it comes from, but until we get our hands on the game, we probably won't know that. Since I mentioned the Flash, let's start right there. The Flash is our only revealed leader for the Energy faction, and his art is from the cover of The Flash, Volume 4, Number 1. This is the start of his New 52 run from 2011, and the art was done by two people, Francis Monopole and Brian Brucelato. From here on out, I'll avoid calling out the artists by name, but I'll mention them on the graphic, so if you're curious about who the artists are, you can see them on the graphic. That's partially because we'll be here a lot longer if I'm reading out all the names, and also because I don't want to butcher anyone's name, because I feel really bad when I do that. Let's stay inside of the Energy faction and move on to Dr. Fate's minion card. This is from Justice Society of America, Volume 3, Number 30. I think that this piece works really well as a comic book cover, but truth be told, I'm not in love with this card art as card art. Something about this piece in the context of a card frame just doesn't do justice to Dr. Fate. Maybe it's something to do with the centering, or I think it might have something to do with his arm looking kind of weird underneath the cloak. Again, it works really well on the comic book cover, but just something about the card frame, I don't know, it just doesn't hit the same. I did not intend for this video to be in faction order, but heck, let's keep the ball rolling, and I guess we'll move on to the Anarchy faction, starting with Punchline. This piece works perfectly well as card art. It's from Batman Volume 3, Number 92, and it's actually a variant cover. It's our first example of a variant cover so far in this video, and again, I think it looks fantastic. If you told me this was original card art for a card game, I'd totally believe you. It works perfect, and it still calls back to that history of the comics. Very, very cool. This is very shortly after Punchline became a character. I'm going off of memory now, this isn't in my script, but I believe Punchline debuted like 3 issues before this. Harley Quinn. Now, this particular one actually delayed this video by a whole day because I could not find a source for it. It took me a very long time, but I finally got there. The search process I do for most of these is just a reverse image search of the card art, but I couldn't find any documented instance of this art outside of a 1,000 piece puzzle that was released for it and a poster made by a company called Pyramid International. I reached out to our fledgling community on Discord, our DC Dual Force community Discord, and thankfully I had a bunch of help from 2 people, RG and The Go Home. RG identified it was likely her early Rebirth run for 2 reasons. One, that the costume matched up with her Rebirth run, and the poster was called Die Laughing, and that also happens to match up with that era or that run or that arc, whatever you want to call it. A little while later, The Go Home came in super clutch and found an eBay listing for the variant cover of Rebirth Harley Quinn, Number 1. For some reason, this variant cover is not documented on the DC Wiki, which is very abnormal. Most of the documentation on there is fantastic, but that lack of documentation for this particular cover is probably the reason it took us so long to find it. Speaking of hard to find, this is to the Batcave. The reason this one was going to be difficult to find always is because it's not a cover, it's a panel. So in order to find this, we had to first identify what issue it was from, what comic it was from, and then manually scroll through that comic until we found the cover. Well, until we found the panel, I should say. Thankfully, pretty early on, we were able to identify that the image's origins come from at least dating back to 2008. Later again, The Go Home came in super clutch and actually found the same image attached to a post about All-Star Batman and Robin, The Boy Wonder. So I got my phone out, I logged into the DC Infinite app, and I started clicking through all of the issues of All-Star Batman and Robin until I found this particular page, which was issue number 4. I forget the page number, but it will be on the graphic. For some reason, I didn't put it in my notes. How silly of me. Speaking of the Bat, here is the Batman leader card. This is from Batman issue number 700, and I think that this is a fantastic piece for Batman's base artwork. Before I jump into the next card, I just want to quickly say, if you are enjoying this video and you like this style of video, please let me know in the comment section, and that way when we get more information about DC Dual Force and they reveal more cards, I'll know that this is the type of video that I should prioritize in the future, because obviously when we get more information, I'm going to have a lot of different things that I want to do, and for me to dedicate time to a video like this, I'm going to need to know it's something that you want to see. Moving on to the Tyranny faction, starting with Gorilla Grodd. This is from Flashpoint, Grodd of War, and look at at how perfectly this piece fits into the card frame. The skull goes right over the top of the rarity gem, and if the artwork was pushed up any higher than it currently is, you would see that forest underneath Gorilla Grodd. But yeah, thankfully it just happens to plug in perfectly into the DC Dual Force card frame, so no issues there. Next up is Thin the Herd. This comes from Superman, Reign of Doomsday. This is a collection of comics. The collection stems from Action Comics number 900 all the way to 904. Obviously, this run is mostly about Doomsday, so of course Doomsday is featured on the collection cover. I will say the colors look a little bit washed out on this piece, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just gives it a different aesthetic to some of the other cards. All right, moving on to our final faction, which is Might, and we're going to be starting things off with Super Strength, which comes from Action Comics Volume 2, number 1. This is another variant cover, so this is not the default cover. This was like a limited variant thing, and what a fantastic variant it is. It looks great, does it not? Superman's base artwork comes from Superman Volume 2, issue 204. If you want to know more information about this issue, you can actually watch my video about all of the comic book references that are found in the DC Dual Force trailer. We went over that trailer, we skimmed everything, we found every single comic book cover we could, and slowly we're updating the comment section with more and more covers that we find over time. So if you're curious to find out more information about that, go watch that video. I think that this art is perfect for Superman's base art. You can see his face perfectly, so you get that like attachment to the character. He leaves enough dead space in the card's art where you can actually see the beautiful city skyline behind him, and of course he's flexing those big Superman muscles. This is sort of the final card we're going to talk about today. Technically we have two cards to go over here. Wonder Woman's in a unique example because we've seen her card art change over time. Back when the game was initially revealed in 2021, the developers put out a tweet with Wonder Woman's base art, but since then in the 2023 trailer we see a new base art for Wonder Woman. So we're first going to start by identifying the original that was attached to the card back in 2021. This one actually has some interesting history. It's from Justice League Volume 3, number 4. There are 7 variants for this issue, each for one of the members of the Justice League, which of course includes Wonder Woman. So that's where that piece comes from. And then the second Wonder Woman, this is the one that we're probably going to actually get in the game because this is the one that was featured in the most recent trailer. This one comes from Wonder Woman number 750, which has a ton of variants for some reason. This in particular is the 2010s variant, which I personally think looks fantastic. Perfect selection for Wonder Woman's base art, I think. If I had to pick a top 3 favorite pieces of art in the game right now, it's the Harley Quinn, the Wonder Woman, and the Superman. I think they're all fantastic and they all work really well for their respective cards. All right, that's it. That's all of the 11 revealed cards so far. Technically 12 we went over because of course the 2 examples of Wonder Woman. Hopefully we get some news about DC Dual Force relatively soon. Thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome and I'll catch you in the next one.